and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who's always part of my rotaciones. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
For better or worse, I am indeed.
For better or worse.
Oh, and also hello.
Hello. We are gathered here today to talk Brazil, Mexico. In part one of the Total Soccer Show, we are recording this, maybe 30, 40 minutes after Brazil v Mexico. If you don't want to know the score, you should have pressed pause by now because it finished 2-0 to Brazil. They may be needing a new trunk to put more trophies in the way they're going.
I feel like they might. And
that lady needs a new car.
It is worth noting, I think we're recording this an hour and 15 minutes after the
really?
game. Yeah, we watched some footage, my friend. We watched some footage.
So, because of the way Juan Carlos Osorio sets up this Mexico team, I always find it fascinating to see what he's trying to do, even when it doesn't work, right? His Germany plan worked. His Brazil plan didn't work. But I think we knew what he was up to.
Yes.
So before we get into the goal... Excuse me. So before we get into the goals, I'd like to talk about what Osorio's plan was, what Mexico nearly pulled off. How about that?
Yeah, so I think roughly the plan was start Rafa Marquez as part of a midfield three, theoretically.
That was the big change, right? Is they dropped Leun on the wing and sacrifice an attacker to have an extra Rafa Marquez in midfield.
You got it. And then I think basically keep him central. That his job was not to drift, not to get pulled out, not to go running and try to mark people. It really was just hold the middle, do not let Brazil come through. If they're coming at you, then you step and try to win the ball, but don't get distracted running with other players. And I think he mostly did that right until the end of the first half.
Yep.
I think that's where you started to see a little bit of fatigue and a little bit of him getting stretched, and that's when I think that's why you had that halftime change.
And there are multiple parts to this plan.
Yep.
So Marquez stays central. That theoretically allows his two midfield partners, Guardado and Herrera, to get forward without repercussions, right? Because then they can theoretically get forward on a sort of counter-attack or join the attack and know that Marquez is holding the fort, right? It also means, and Stu Holden on Fox pointed this out, full credit to Stu Holden, he noticed that Mexico's fullbacks, Gallardo at left back and who started at right back? Alvarez at right back, essentially man-marked the wingers, Neymar and Willian, which I think was a smart move because instead of letting, say, Neymar get it at midfield and then you all start crowding him, if you just have one guy follow him the whole time, you just set up this 1v1 matchup and you make it difficult for him to receive the ball. Then you risk your fullbacks being pushed out, but Marquez stays home, so there's always a little bit of extra cover. It almost worked.
It did, and I would say like one of the only good chances Brazil got, I think, was when
first half
was when Alvarez did come inside just a little bit too much and left Neymar on the wing. It's a big ball over the top from, I believe, Wagner, and it basically then you've got Alvarez trying to close Neymar down really quickly. He over pursues, and then there's a vulnerability.
Yep.
So I think that's specifically what those fullbacks were designed to do. They stay back. They don't then have to over pursue or chase people down. They keep their shape. Rafa Marquez screens, and now you've essentially got those five defenders really blocking off a lot of options. You keep those two midfielders ahead of him, as you said, in Guardado and Herrera.
Yeah.
And then from there, basically, you can play into them. They can trigger that counterattack. And so it's almost very quickly becomes five defenders, becomes five attackers.
Can we just talk about what the risky part of this is, though, that seemed to pay off at least for the first 30 minutes or so?
Sure.
So if you've seen Sweden or Denmark play, they have their back four. Their right back and left back will not go chasing the opposition winger. They will stay compact and on the inside. And then those teams will then allow the opposition to spread the ball wide and let the winger, like say Neymar, receive it in space, and then we go and defend him. What Mexico gambled on, what Osorio gambled on, is stick with him all the time.
Yep.
Even if he goes wide, you follow him wide. Just go with him all the time, and we'll worry about the rest later, and Rafa Marquez will hopefully cover some of that up.
Yeah.
It worked for, I want to say, 20-something minutes.
I would say really up until maybe the 30th minute, thereabouts, that's when I think my notes turn into why are Brazil starting to get more chances.
Yes.
And it's because, so then the fullbacks are so focused on tracking those two wide players that then you start to see Neymar go all the way back to like standing next to Felipe Luis, and suddenly there's a huge amount of space that Felipe Coutinho regularly occupies.
Brazil figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? I think Brazil figure this out and start to use Mexico's plan to Brazil's advantage.
I would say they figure it out 80%. And I mean that it's not just because they don't score in the first half. It's because what I think the difference was and where the goal comes from Brazil is that once, say, in the first half, Neymar would drop back next to Felipe Luis. Now there's space for Coutinho. What I think that was it, basically.
For Coutinho to run into behind Alvarez and Neymar and essentially be a bonus left winger with no right back because the right backs followed Neymar.
Exactly. Yeah? But so then I think the difference was, so then they would play that ball into Coutinho, but then it's kind of, that's it. What I think started to happen at the very end of the first half and then the beginning of the second half is when Coutinho made that run, Paulinho made the run into where Coutinho was, and now you've got that other run.
Classic Paulinho run.
You've got that third man running, and suddenly now you've got this Mexican player following that player, then this one following this, and then this one following, and suddenly they're all following and they're getting pulled, and that is what I think made Juan Carlos Osorio frustrated. I think that's another part of the reason why you see Rafa Marquez go at halftime, because
he subbed out at halftime is the interesting thing.
Because the difference then is that instead of Herrera and Guardado being ahead of Marquez, now you have Herrera coming back inside, and then suddenly he's almost another holding midfielder, and now you don't have any outlet down that left wing, and that's why Mexico really started to focus on the right wing, not because they wanted to, but because they had to pull players back to deal with the overloading runs from Brazil.
Can we also talk about maybe a couple of smart things Chiche did? The Brazil coach.
We've only got like 30 minutes, but we can try.
So, but you mentioned him figuring out the man-to-man marking of the fullbacks and Brazil's wingers, right? I love that no matter what you do to Brazil, Chiche's plan always ends up being, and then there's a late run from Paulinho.
Yep.
I feel like everything else is just the prologue to, and then there's a late run from Paulinho. The other thing they did is they learned from Germany's mistakes. Remember the mistake Germany made that Mexico exploited was Joshua Kimmich, especially the right back, got too far forward. We watched Fagner, the right back, and Felipe Luis, the left back for Brazil, mostly the first half. They just didn't venture too far forward because they didn't want to give Lozano and Vela on the wings the chance to get in behind them.
Yeah, and I mean, and extend
it's
that
simple but brilliant,
and extend it to set pieces as well. We watched this both, like you can see it in the usual camera and from the tactics cam. They sent at most one center back forward. They kept Brazil. They kept both fullbacks back. So on every set piece, you had basically 3 defenders and then one player usually ahead of them. So they kept 4, sometimes 5 players back on their own set pieces because
why?
Because they were keenly aware that Chicharito's staying up top, and what Mexico have been looking to do is they win the set piece, they play it to Chicharito, he lays it off into the channel, and then Mexico can break. So you keep those 2 fullbacks back, they've blocked off the channel, they've cut that out. You've got at least one center back. Usually they're doing the front and follow on Chicharito, so there's no outlet to Chicharito, and even if Mexico bang it long, you've got the numbers there to basically collect it calmly and recycle possession.
Does this explain why, even when Mexico had sort of half attacks, half chances in the first half, when things felt somewhat optimistic, there would be Lozano or Vela coming in from the wings, but they would be facing a fullback, right? And even if they beat the fullback, there was always a couple of centre-backs ready to be there as well. Casemiro was often ready to close down space. Essentially, Brazil never let themselves get opened up so that Lozano or Vela could do anything super dangerous.
Yeah.
It was exciting just because it's exciting when those players get the ball, but there were always numbers between them and the goal.
And and that's another key part of what I think Chichi did that was so intelligent, is that even when they did start to send fullbacks, when Brazil would send Fagner or Felipe Luis forward,
they started sneaking, right?
They did, but when they did, Casemiro stayed back and he filled that space. And it was automatic. There wasn't a delay. There was never any vulnerability. He knew, that guy's going, I'm going to slide in. The other fullback stays. They kept that shape the whole time, and there really weren't many outlets for Mexico. So much so, I think you pointed this out, that when Mexico did get their opportunities, you could see how they sort of had that mentality of, we're not going to get many of these chances, we got to do something with them. And I think that's why you saw more like low percentage shots from Mexico, because they were forcing opportunities.
The very best example, I think, is Chucky Lozano towards the end of the first half has a run down the left, and he just has this weird left-footed shot that goes almost straight into the crowd. It's not even threatening at goal. I think in the second half, just before Brazil's goal, Gallardo, the left back from Mexico, burst forward, and he has one to his left, one to his right.
He had Lozano to his left, Chicharito to his right.
Oh, 2 great options, and yet he chooses to shoot. I think there was just a bit of a panic, like, this is the moment, I have to take the moment, and then they make the wrong decision.
Yeah, because I genuinely believe that, like, in that first game against Germany, that's a goal for Mexico. That Gallardo drives forward, he lays it wide to Lozano. Lozano either has a shot or sucks in a defender. He squares it to Chicharito, who's wide open to the back post, and it's a goal for Mexico. But I think when you just have that, like, I've got this chance, and we don't have many chances, and if I score this, I'll be the hero, I'm going to shoot. Why not?
One extra example is Chicharito when he gets he does get kind of loose, and he gets to dribble at, I believe it's Fagner or maybe Miranda, and he does that weird step over, and then he goes without the ball and has to try and come back for it.
Yep.
That was a moment of, another day Chicharito gets that.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think to continue with Chicharito for a moment, another thing we noticed when we were on the Mexican soccer show, which was always an enjoyable time.
Yes.
We were talking about the
seriously. Go listen to them today. They'll probably have a really interesting take on this game.
Yeah, I think a lot of obscenities up front, but then yes,
no, they work clean, right?
Oh, do they? Okay, well there you go.
I think so. I can't guarantee it.
But I think one thing we talked about was the interplay of Chicharito and Carlos Vela, and how we had spotted both in the Sweden game, in the Korea game, and in the Germany game, how Chicharito would stay high, but then sometimes he would drop into the middle, Vela would replace him, and there would be that change. And in this game, it was Chicharito staying high the entire game. For like a good 10-minute spell, he just walked back and forth behind the two center backs for Brazil. And I think, again, that was part of the plan of, say, Rafa Marquez wins the ball, he turns, he plays it to Herrera. Herrera can drive forward, he can either find Guardado, he can play it to Chicharito, Chicharito can lay it out wide, and you have those patterns we've seen from Mexico, but it just really didn't work on the day.
He ended up looking stranded, didn't he? Like, I think his job was, to keep Brazil's backline pinned back, but I think they just wanted to be there anyway, so then he just got lost, right? I mean, I think I called it the sunken place, is where he ended up just sitting between or behind Silva and Miranda, but doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get to Brazil's first goal, which is early in the second half, Osorio makes a major change at halftime.
Yep.
He pulls Rafa Marquez out, subs him out after 45 minutes, brings in Leun, moves Edson Alvarez from right back to defensive centre midfield in the Rafa Marquez defensive midfield holding spot, and puts Leun at right back to man mark Neymar. Fair?
Yep.
That's a correct description of what happens?
I would say so.
Okay, before we talk about the consequences of that, why did he do that? Did he think the Rafa Marquez thing wasn't working?
I don't think so. This is completely. I haven't seen any quotes from Juan Carlos Osorio. I could be totally wrong, but just from the tactics cam, you can see him throughout the entire first half. It's Rafa Marquez he's relaying the instructions to. It's Rafa Marquez who is then we called him like the traffic conductor. I think that he's constantly telling people where they need to be and how they need to move, and don't go there and stay back and you should go forward. And I think that's all
passing off attackers to various people, right?
And I think because of that, I never saw Juan Carlos Osorio really losing his mind and screaming at Rafa Marquez and Rafa Marquez screaming back. I just think you started to see Marquez get a little bit gassed. Brazil had one run late in the first half where he just can't make up the distance. Marquez couldn't close Coutinho.
I remember that.
And it just makes me think...
He gave up chasing him and just sort of tried to sneakily mark someone else and pretend it wasn't his fault.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's a very ungenerous interpretation of what happened. But I think what we're both saying is that Marquez maybe didn't have the legs to cover the ground that you need. Like, it's like a later career Kyle Beckerman for the US, right? When he didn't, like, even though he does the right things, he doesn't have the pace or the gas to move around and cover. He doesn't eat enough space to be effective.
It's certainly, that's a huge part of it. I would also say, though, that if you are the player who is responsible for directing most of what your team is doing, it's like it's an intensifier in terms of how fatigued you get, because if you're exhausting yourself mentally trying to make sure you're observing every single little thing and relaying instructions, it wears you down mentally while you're being wear down.
I can speak to this. I've made a lot of mistakes because I've been busy trying to organize everybody else. It's a good way to look really foolish as well.
And so I wouldn't say you've never looked foolish. I wouldn't say it was a planned substitution, but I would not be surprised if one of Carlos Osorio's Carlos is what I wanted to call him. Many plans was at halftime we'll evaluate Rafa, and I bet it was a conversation. I doubt Rafa Marquez was like, "Yep, I want to come out," but I'm assuming it was a sort of a pre-level determined, like, nope, you got to come. And then I'm guessing Plan B was, okay, Alvarez will go central, we'll try that, and I'm fairly confident that Plan C was, and if that doesn't work, Jonathan Gonzalez comes in.
Jonathan Dos Santos.
I knew I would do it, Jonathan Dos Santos.
Yeah.
I told you before we started recording I would say Jonathan Gonzalez, and I knocked it out of the park.
So
with my incompetence.
So the weird thing is, I can't remember the minute Brazil score in the second half.
51.
So it's not long. 6 minutes into the second half. Osorio's move immediately after that is to remove Edson Alvarez from the game as that defensive midfielder and replace him with Jonathan Dos Santos, at which point Osorio is on his third central defensive midfielder of the game, which says this thing is not quite working, or this is the plan, but the guy isn't doing the job quite as well as I wanted him to.
And I want to emphasize, literally as soon as they score. Like, it's Brazil run off to celebrate, and you watch Juan Carlos Osorio walk back to his bench. He walks out, he screams at the subs, and Jonathan Dos Santos comes running over.
No, it's Gonzalez.
That would be slightly more headline making. Yeah, I mean, it really is.
The irony is Jonathan Gonzalez might have been the guy to do a really good job in that position in this game, but that's definitely a conversation for another day.
You'll get no arguments from me. But, so just to reiterate, it is literally as Brazil are still running off to celebrate as a team, that Jonathan Dos Santos is being waved on. And I think we have the reason why.
Yes. All right. So we've danced around this goal for long enough. I think we should get into Brazil's opening goal, scored by Neymar, made by Neymar.
Yes.
And his back heel.
And maybe Willian a little bit.
Willian was also involved.
I'm going to say 50-50.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I say it's 50-50 because, to do the quick gist of it, Neymar gets the ball out wide, dribbles inside. Mexico get a little bit focused on the fact that Neymar is dribbling at their goal. They get scared. A bunch of defenders go with him.
4 defenders are focused on him by the time he backheels it to Willian.
Who then does what I think you called the Kylian Mbappe.
Yeah, it was an Mbappe tribute. Where you burst into space, but you know where you're going and you know when you're going to shoot, so you're in the right spot.
And I would say you have, like, I keep going back to boxing with it, but it's like the setup jab for the uppercut or for like the big hook, where he takes that little first touch and he pulls 2 defenders in, and then he just goes and gets by. I think it's ALLLL is the closest one. Is nowhere close enough to dealing with Willian's speed.
I watched this in slow-mo, and if you get a chance to watch this in slow-mo, it is stunning how quickly Willian accelerates away from ALLLL. I think ALLLL just sort of isn't ready for it because he's been taken by surprise by the Neymar back heel. I'm not sure ALLLL is all that slow, but he gets left in Willian's dust.
And there are a few signals here that things are breaking down for Mexico. One of them is that it's Neymar basically sliding in to finish the I'm going to say it was a pass from Willian based on the angle, the way he hits it.
Very generous.
Maybe he was trying to shoot, but it definitely was not going on frame, so it's good that Neymar is there if you're a Brazil fan. But the fact that it goes from 3-4 Mexican players are all focused on Neymar to suddenly, that back heel happened and no one is focused on Neymar. That to me speaks that, we have all made that mistake. We've overcommitted to Neymar. Let's all get back into our position. And in everybody trying to scramble back to where they should be, they stop paying attention to Neymar.
I want to talk about this for a second because I think I have twice highlighted this problem that Mexico wanted to avoid, which is don't have 2, 3, 4 people trying to tackle Neymar all at once. I think they did a brilliant job of not doing that in the first half, right? I think the Juan Carlos Osorio man-to-man marking Neymar thing was a huge part of the solution. This is the first time that you had, say, Leon is marking him. He's the right back, Neymar's the left winger. That is the correct matchup, right? This is the first time, as Neymar dribbles across the top, that Edson Alvarez gets dragged into it. Hector Herrera comes over and gets dragged into it. And ALLLL doesn't go all the way, but he definitely is fully focused on Neymar and watching him and not ready for the back heel to Willian. It is the first time they all over-focus on Neymar, and it's the first time they concede a goal because Neymar exploits it. Neymar uses his... I'm going to call it celebrity. He weirdly has an on-field celebrity where all eyes are on him. It's like all of Mexican defenders work for TMZ. So that when he releases the back heel, one, they're sort of weirdly relieved. Oh, Neymar's not going to school all of us. But then they forget about him, and he's able, as you said, to make that quick run to the back post. No one goes with him.
No one goes with him. And so then I think what I found myself wondering is, why is this Alvarez's fault? And we went back and watched from a couple of different angles several times. And I think the answer...
to underline, it's not like you decided it was Alvarez's fault, but you saw Osorio sub in Dos Santos for Alvarez immediately after, so that must have been something Alvarez did.
Exactly. I mean, it's basically, if you make a halftime change and put somebody at holding midfield, and then very quickly, nope, that's not happening. And I think the reason why is because Alvarez, I'm guessing, was put on because he's younger. He can run more than Rafa Marquez.
Marquez's age, give or take.
And I think he can help contribute to the attack a bit more is theoretically the idea. Rafa Marquez never tried to go charging out of their back. Mexico very content to build very slowly out of the back.
I wouldn't say content.
Well, forced to, maybe is a better way. But so then you watch Alvarez in this sequence in the lead up to this goal, and I think that enthusiasm and that willingness to run and cover ground actually goes against what he's been told to do.
I think that's exactly right. I think he covers too much ground. He chases around. He ends up chasing 3 different people.
He is holding the middle as Brazil start to dribble through. Then he notices, Coutinho's kind of open. I better go cover Coutinho. And that's exactly that space that he leaves is where Willian comes in. It's why Willian is wide open for that back heel. And then Alvarez gets so focused on Neymar's run inside that he gets sucked inside following that. And again, it leaves Willian the space where Alvarez was is where Willian dribbles when he gets that back heel.
So the correct play from Alvarez, according to what we saw Marquez do and what we very much assume Osorio's instructions were, is... hold the middle, don't let anyone arrive there. Don't go chasing waterfalls, right?
Stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to. And in this case, it would have been stick to the rivers and lakes in the middle of the field. So then when Neymar cuts inside, you're there just to clear it away.
Exactly.
Instead of chase him down.
Extra bonus here for Willian.
And TLC for writing a great song.
We said that Mexico did that job of man-mark both the fullbacks. fullbacks man mark the wingers. This is good stuff from Willian to
100%,
break free from just being man-marked by Gallardo. And the way to do it is to go so far inside, and he ends up basically down the left wing, that Gallardo's probably not going to follow him all the way over there because it would leave too big of a gap. So he's exploiting that as well.
Yep, and then it's 1-0 to Brazil. You have Mexico make a change, and then very quickly I think they've burned through all three subs. They've burned through all three before like the 60th or 65th minute.
This is interesting to me. This goes back to what Osorio said about the Chile game.
Yes. It's definitely the ghost of the Chile game haunting this one.
So this is in Grant Wall's book, Masters of Modern Soccer. There's the Hernandez Chicharito chapter, but it ends up being the half Osorio chapter.
Yep.
He talks about what happened in that Copa America Centenario Chile game where we lost 7-0 is I had a plan and I just kept watching and thinking the plan will start working soon. And he basically admits that means that he froze. He didn't start making changes to try and fix what was happening.
Yep.
That's why I would argue he changes the Marquez thing at halftime. Then he sees that the Alvarez thing isn't working out. And rather than freeze, he's thinking, this isn't Chile. I'm not going to freeze. I'm not going to let this get out of hand. I'm going to change it. So I think that's why Dos Santos comes in for Alvarez, is he wants to fix it right here, right now. Let's get back on track. And I think the same thing with the next two subs coming so quickly is, I'm going to fix this now. I'm going to fix this now.
Yeah. I mean, that was the second sub. I think he had one more after that, and then you're done. Yeah.
The final sub was Jimenez.
Yeah.
Jimenez comes, does he just straight come on for Chicharito?
Yep.
Yeah. So Jimenez comes on, and by the end of this game, Mexico are just swinging crosses in, aiming for Raul Jimenez, and I think he wins maybe 1 or 2 aerial balls, but they're not very threatening at all. It was very easy for Brazil to deal with in the end.
And I think I'm going like way too deep on Juan Carlos Osorio's plans for this one, but my guess would be...
Well, it's worth noting that he is a candidate to be the next US men's national team coach, so our American listeners should maybe be interested in what JCO is doing.
But yeah, and I think maybe not with that in mind, but sure, that's a good point. But I would say that like I'm guessing that, as we talked about already, like one of the subs he had planned was Rafa Marquez. If this isn't working at halftime, we'll make that change. The other one that we heard about from Stu Holden and John Strong on a couple occasions was that Javier Hernandez kept trying to stretch out that hamstring muscle. Yeah. He just looked a little sore, a little bit tender, and I think they had that plan. 60th minute, if things aren't working, Chicharito comes out. I think that was a plan that they had probably always planned upon. Yeah. But that's 2 changes, and it leaves you one more for flexibility. And I think he probably wasn't planning on having to sub out Alvarez, 6-7 minutes after he had made that change?
Yeah.
So I think that was the one that maybe... I mean, obviously other things went wrong, and I'm not sure that one substitution is the reason they weren't able to get back into the game. But that's basically 2 changes for a defensive midfielder. You have a lot of attacking talent on that bench that wasn't able to be utilized as a result.
So you would have needed to get to extra time to use that
pretty much
serve, right? Can we talk about the second goal?
Let's do it.
I feel bad saying this, but it's mostly Ayala's fault.
Yep,
yeah,
100%.
Ayala is looking to... I mean, it's late, right? It's the 88th minute, so it's late in the game. Mexico are chasing it. Ayala's bringing the ball out of the back. He's a centre-back. I think he's looking for either Lozano or Herrera, but he essentially is trying to play a ball into midfield, and he's forcing it. It's not really on. And Fernandinho, who's come on at this point, reads it, picks it off, launches the pass for Neymar.
Yeah.
Ayala...
Yeah, this is the part that's pretty damning.
Ayala is the guy that was being pressured by Neymar when he played the pass, so he's the closest to Neymar, very much so. I think he pulls up, and as Fernandinho plays the pass in behind, Ayala just stops for an offside. Thinks he's caught Neymar, didn't look across the line. I don't know who they are. I can't remember who it is.
All 3 other... like at least 2, if not all 3 Mexican defenders are all keeping him onside.
They're all keeping Neymar onside. Neymar's read the line perfectly. Ayala has not.
Yeah.
It feels bad saying it because I know it's a moment of panic and of trying to push for the equaliser, but that's why Neymar is free to burst down that left wing.
And it's
I believe he's trying to shoot. He tries to toe poke this past Ochoa.
Yeah, I think he does too. Ochoa gets a save to it, but Firmino is there. He also had come on. He puts it home. But I think...
Good subs from Chiche. 2 subs involved in that.
I mean, lots of good stuff from Chiche. Chichi, excuse me, before we get emails. But I would also say, though, that we've talked about this before. This is why coaches get so frustrated with their players, specifically defenders, when they turn the ball over cheaply. Because as soon as you make that mistake and then compound it by thinking, I'll catch him offside. No, I won't. Then everybody's scrambling to the point where I believe it is Salcedo. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's him. Salcedo has no idea.
Did he have bleached hair?
Yes.
Then it was Salcedo.
Then it could have been one of 4 people. He has no idea that Firmino is there because he is so focused on, I'm going to get back central, I'm going to make sure Neymar doesn't cut inside and have a shot. He just does not realize that Firmino is there. You see him turn and sort of look like, what? How did that happen? As Firmino taps it in, 2-0 to Brazil.
Okay, final thing I want to talk about is Layun's attempt to rile Neymar.
Sure.
I'm going to give him a C minus.
Yep.
So there's the one moment.
This is really I would say the one really like, oh, Neymar, come on, man. You don't need to do that moment.
There's one moment where Neymar is down and pretending to be way more hurt than he is.
Yep.
And Layun does a smart thing of roughly picking him up.
Yep.
Right? So you can say, like, you're not going to get a card for that because you can say, I was just helping him up.
Yeah.
But he definitely, like, grabs him a bit hard and jokes him up.
Layun, like, kind of gives him, like, a slight shove on the back as the ball's going out for a throw, and Layun's trying to get to it fast, and Neymar sells that one not very well.
So I think that was good stuff from Layun. I think he has the moral high ground at that point.
Yeah.
About 5 minutes later, there's another, I think there's some sort of collision on the end line. They're both down. Layun goes over
71st minute,
He goes over to get the ball, and Layun definitely, deliberately presses down, steps and presses like an accelerator pedal on Neymar's ankle. And Neymar then rolls around as if he's been sort of, there was a knife stabbed into his ankle. He's definitely overreacting. But he's overreacting to draw attention to the bit of sneakiness that Layun just did.
Yep.
Layun's lucky not to be sent off at that point.
I think he is, and I do feel like there's a little bit of an element of boy who cried wolf for Neymar in this one. That the referee does not...
Boy who cried ouch.
Yes. Boy who just cried, I guess. Because the referee doesn't go to VAR. It's not looked at again. I'm sure the VAR crew were looking at it.
They did look at it. Wasn't there a quick shot of them all leaning into the monitor?
They were looking... I mean, I think they're reviewing every play.
Yeah.
But I think the referee chooses not to review it himself, and I think it's because he thinks... Okay, maybe he stepped on him. I'm guessing that conversation was, oh, he stepped on him? Did he mean to? Okay. Was it trying to hurt him? Okay. And then it was like you compare that to the reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, it still doesn't justify it. For me, that easily could have been a red card.
Yeah.
But I think
can we take our guess at why it wasn't a red card? Because they went to Dr. Joe.
Yeah.
And I think when Dr. Joe says it's not a clear and obvious error, that's code for I don't know.
Yep.
Well, so can we at least maybe speculate as to why that wasn't a red card? I have a theory, but I don't want to be me keep talking.
No, go ahead. I would like to hear your theory.
I think that you can argue...
No, your theory's wrong.
I think that you can argue that it just... He accidentally stepped on the ankle, and therefore there's like a defensible thing about it.
I would add a key, like a clarification there would be... I think it could be argued that it was an accident.
There we go.
I think you could say, like, did he definitely mean to do it? Not necessarily. He's trying to get the ball. The ball's in a tangle of legs.
That's
whatever.
the key part, right? If there's no ball there and it's just Layun walking over and stepping down on the ankle, there's no reason to be there. But because he had a reason to be there and another thing he was doing, this is a classic Diego Costa, Luis Suarez move, right? If you're doing another thing and you do the dirty thing while you're doing another thing, you sort of have a little bit of cover. So Layun had just enough cover to not get a red card, even with VAR.
And I'm not saying it's justified. Like, I'm not saying this justifies it, but I would say that if you're the center official there, you're talking to the VAR crew, and the two questions I would ask would be, did he deliberately step on him? Or maybe three questions. Did he deliberately step on him? Yes. Was it malicious, or could it have been an accident? It could have been an accident. Was it hard enough to justify that reaction from Neymar? No, it wasn't.
So it's the boy who cried ouch.
Yeah, so I think so. But I think you pointed out as we continue to watch that I think Brazil, or you think, and I totally agree, that Brazil sort of then were like, ooh, Layun can be got. And I think they sort of recognized that he was, they went at him a couple times.
Other players ran at him after that.
Jesus
right?
definitely tries to meg him once. Yeah. And it feels very deliberate, like, oh, you're going to hurt our boy? Well, then we're going to try to humiliate you. My final thing that I wanted to talk about before we wrap this up, if you don't mind, is just I want to talk about Chichi, because I think it will be maybe lost in the shuffle because it's Mexico not getting the quinto partido. I think like you're going to talk about that. There's going to be, does Juan Carlos Osorio go? Neymar was good. Neymar scored. That's wonderful. So many of these decisions that we've talked about come from the manager, and it comes from, as we've talked about time and time again in this World Cup, teams that have a system, that stick to the system, and that make it very clear what's expected of their players have an automatic advantage over teams that don't.
Mm-hmm. I would say because you have a base layer of this is the plan, this is the system, and then you can apply tweaks on top of that. Tweaks such as, oh, they're man-marking our wingers. Let's find a way to sneak in behind them. Right? Once you have a system, you can tweak it to your advantage.
Oh, they're going to break on the counter. Let's keep numbers back. Let's not focus on trying to definitely get a goal off of a corner. Let's just recognize that corners are maybe an opportunity, but also certainly a vulnerability. And the big thing that stands out to me, and part of the reason why I was so annoyed with Neymar for these two run-ins with Layun, is because outside of that, there wasn't anything that we saw from that first game against Switzerland. There's obviously going to be moments of flash,
selfishness,
but there wasn't Neymar just trying to draw fouls and trying to take people on constantly. And again,
Firmino, what's the word of? You're sort of. I think you're like a mini famine because you're not passing the food around. That was
Firmino or whatever it was. Yeah, but it was. There wasn't any of that. And again, we talk about after that first game against Switzerland that he got a talking to from Chichi, who basically told him, like, that is not what I want from you. And
share the food.
And this was a team performance from Brazil. And you look at the 2 goals they get. One of them is Neymar sliding in at the back post after some really good work from Willian. The other one is Firmino getting in at the back post after some really good work from Neymar. But it feels like it's much more of a comprehensive team performance from Brazil.
The thing I would absolutely circle is the fact that Neymar has that dribble, draws 4 people in, and uses it to backheel it to an open teammate. That's the key to Neymar's performance if you're looking for one.
I agree completely because I think against Switzerland, he tries a low percentage shot or he draws a foul at the top of the box, and then Neymar is taking a free kick from the top of the box that maybe goes in but maybe hits the wall. Nothing comes of it.
Final thing about the Mexico not making the Quinto Partido, which for those who don't know, it's the 5th game. It's Mexico quarterfinal, which they just it's been years and years and years. I think this was the 7th time in a row that they've made the round of 16. It may be 6. Apologies if I got that wrong, but it's many times in a row Mexico's made the round of 16, not advanced to the quarterfinals. In hindsight, I think Alexis Lalas called this out. The problem was the Sweden game, right? If they'd won or even tied, I think, that Sweden game, they would finish top of the group. They would have been playing Switzerland in the round of 16. They finished 2nd in the group. You have to play Brazil.
I mean, and that's what it comes down to. That's why you really you can do what Croatia did and gamble, and it might work out, but you can also maybe not necessarily be as focused on your opponent as your next opponent, and it can lead to situations where you're playing Brazil.
Well, speaking of situations where you're playing Brazil, today's other round of 16 game was Belgium versus Japan for the honour of playing Brazil in the quarterfinals.
It's an honour now.
We'll be discussing that game in just a minute. But first, we have Taylor Rockwell, a new sponsor for the Total Soccer Show. Please welcome, come on down, ExpressVPN, and thank you for sponsoring today's show.
If you're going to say, come on down, we got to go that route. Yes, ExpressVPN, cutting the cord used to mean cutting yourself off from all the World Cup action, but now with ExpressVPN, you can watch every World Cup match on your computer, phone, or tablet.
Not just the World Cup, though. VPN gives you access to all the content in the world. But Taylor, what is a VPN? I know that it stands for Virtual Private Network. Some people will be VPN savvy. Some people will not be VPN savvy. So what's a virtual private network?
First of all, I would say that I am not necessarily VPN savvy, but I shall do my best. The best analogy I've seen is essentially that like firewalls protect the data when it's on your computer. A VPN helps protect your data when you're connecting to the internet. It essentially gives you different IP addresses, so it's not a flag above your head saying, I'm Daryl Grove. It can say, I'm many different people, but it allows you a more secure connection that is also a private connection.
Yep, so, and the privacy also means that people can't get at your data, right? So you can have, say, if you have a FaceTime call or a Skype call and you're using VPN or any sort of conversation, no one is hacking into that, right?
That's right.
If you are Brazil's coaches and you're discussing your tactics, you need to do it from different locations. The Juan Carlos Osorio and co would not have been able to check in on what you're doing. Actually, if you're playing Sweden, it's more important because Sweden have a history of spying on the opposition.
That's right. Yeah? Because anytime you're putting yourself out there on the training field or logging onto the internet, you're putting your sensitive data at risk. So sometimes it
would be the Swiss coaching staff, right, who need it if they're protecting themselves from Sweden.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And while we're sticking with the World Cup for a second, I'll say, like, if you are maybe tired of some of the coverage you've seen on your television device, you might be able to use the VPN service to change the IP address so you can access the coverage in, say, England with the BBC.
Yep, you can. You can watch. It's shared between BBC and ITV, but with ExpressVPN, you can say, hey, I'm in the UK. Give me access to all the content that's being streamed online by BBC and ITV. Same if you want to maybe pretend you're in Canada or France, you can watch that nation's coverage by streaming it. Best of all, ExpressVPN has right now it has a World Cup guide. It will show you what channel in what country and how to access it. There's a very handy ExpressVPN guide. One final thing I want to say about ExpressVPN. I've used a VPN in the past. I've used different VPNs. I recently started using ExpressVPN. I give it the thumbs up because there's no lag. It is nice and smooth, really good quality stuff.
I would agree with all that. So to unlock access to streaming content you want today and find out how you can get 3 months free, go to expressvpn.com/Total Soccer Show. That's all one word, all uppercase. That's expressvpn.com/Total Soccer Show for 3 months free with a 1-year package.
One more time, that's expressvpn.com/Total Soccer Show. You'll learn more if you follow that URL. We'll also put it in the show notes, so you can just click it.
That works. All right, so let's move on to Belgium v. Japan. I'm assuming people have seen it, so I'm just going to say,
what a game! What a game!
That was impressive, and not what I expected.
I owe some of the people in the other offices in our building an apology, possibly, because I yelled a lot during this game. The second half was full of surprises, full of yell-worthy moments.
But at least you did it leaning up against the wall that we share so that they could really, really clearly hear you.
Oh, so Japan went 2 goals up in quick succession. Belgium froze for a second, then made some changes, came back, won 3-2.
Yep.
I want to say the last 10 seconds is when Chadley scores the winner for Belgium. So much going on here.
Yep.
I think maybe the question to start with is, why did Belgium find themselves 2-0 down?
Sure. And I mean, I think we basically rewatched most of the game, I would say.
Because it was fascinating, right? It was tactically fascinating, this game.
And I think the answer is essentially that Belgium went with the lineup we thought they were going to go with, 3-4-2-1, which leaves you with 2 midfielders against Japan's 4-2-3-1. That's 3 midfielders against 2. So you're always going to have an overload problem. And then I think Japan did a very good job of pulling those 2 midfielders in Axel Witsel and Kevin De Bruyne to either side. So you kept having huge gaps, which number 1 is easy to counterattack. But number 2, it kind of prevents you from getting any sort of consistent possession through the middle.
Yep, I think that's exactly it. So if you imagine just 2 men, Axel Witsel and Kevin De Bruyne, trying to hold down the entire midfield, it's fine if they only do that, right? But Kevin De Bruyne has ambitions, correct ambitions, to be the playmaker. He wants to go and join the attack. He wants to wander around and make sure that, because he's Kevin De Bruyne, he wants to make sure that he receives the ball. He's also not a natural track back and put tackles in. Like, in many ways, he's too talented to just be running after people. Is, I would say, how Kevin De Bruyne feels about it. I would argue this is Roberto Martinez, the Belgium coach, underestimating Japan and thinking that it's just good enough to put all that talent out there, and thinking De Bruyne wouldn't have to do much of a defensive job. And Roberto Martinez was wrong.
He was. And I think you can extend that further to if De Bruyne is allowed to kind of run around and make plays that he wants, it's then incumbent upon Axel Witsel to stay home and try to shield the back 3 or back 5 and really cut out options. But then you're basically asking one guy to cover the entire midfield, and you could see it. Witsel was sometimes way out on the right touchline, sometimes he was on the left touchline, sometimes he was central, but most of the time he was spread and trying to transition from one space to another.
Do you think Witsel was out of the middle a lot also because Japan pressed when Belgium had the ball? Witsel would go out of position searching for spaces where he could receive the ball, and then when it broke down, suddenly there's just a giant hole in the middle and Japanese midfielders come streaming through it.
Yes, I think that.
It's like
I mean, if you're going to ask me a yes, no question, yes, I think that's exactly what happened. I think you saw in the first 30 minutes, he would try to hold up the ball. He'd say, get it from Vincent Kompany, who started in the middle of the 3 center backs. He gets it from Vincent Kompany. He feels immediate pressure. He drops it off to Vincent Kompany, so that by the end of the first half, Witsel would get the ball, play it back, but then he would, sprint out and essentially be like another right wing back / right center back, which is okay if Japan follow you and you stretch them, but they didn't. They stayed compact and they continued to pressure. And so basically Witsel has now abdicated the space where he needs to be, and also Japan haven't bit on that sort of lure.
So let's talk about Japan's first goal.
Sure.
This is maybe the best example of many examples of Witsel and De Bruyne not controlling the middle of the field. It's Belgium have the ball, they're attacking down the wing, and it's turned over. I believe it's Meunier, the right wing back, is trying to get on the end of a 1-2 with Dries Mertens, right? And Inui, Japanese left winger, gets in the way, launches a counterattack.
Yeah, I mean, he basically collects the ball. Kevin De Bruyne, I think, thinks he's going to help out, as he did most of this game. He drifts over to sort of try to provide pressure, but doesn't realize that, again, because Witsel has stayed somewhat central, but a little bit out of position, now there's a huge amount of space in the middle. So
he was the last man guarding the midfield, and instead he went too far forward.
And then it's basically Inui plays to Shibasaki. Belgium are trying to transition, try to block that off, but basically at that point, Shibasaki is dribbling at the back 3, takes a touch, plays it in. Vertonghen almost cuts it out, but can't quite get a clean touch to it, so then it spills all the way to Haraguchi, who looks like he messed this up, but still finishes.
I yelled, "Why didn't you shoot?" when he sort of stutters.
You did.
I think it might have been a deliberate stutter and not an accidental stutter, because that sells Courtois on moving, right? And then he fires it into the far post. Well done, Haraguchi. Also, well done, Shibasaki, for not playing the obvious ball. Like the obvious ball would have been to the outside of Haraguchi, right?
Yeah.
The thing that he does that plays it on the inside of Vertonghen maybe confuses Vertonghen because no one's expecting that.
Well, I think
it's like a Spanish Inquisition.
Vertonghen is trying to, the Japanese Inquisition, I guess. Vertonghen is trying to, I think, keep some like level of the same distance between himself and Vincent Kompany. And so he's trying to kind of like sit on that fence a little bit. And in so doing, he leaves that gap. Then he has to try to make the play. So I think you're absolutely right. It's a really smart ball that leaves him sort of trapped in no man's land.
And I wonder if after seeing his midfield busted open and Japan come through the middle, Roberto Martinez is already thinking, maybe I should try and fix this. But he doesn't act fast enough. And before you know it, it's 2-0 Japan.
No, I don't think he is.
You don't think he is?
No, I really don't.
That's interesting.
And this is not me just being critical of Roberto Martinez. If we saw a Juan Carlos Osorio situation where after that goal in the 48th minute, if some players are warming up, then somebody's called over and then a goal happens to happen, that's what happens. But in this case, it's 48th minute, 52nd minute is the second goal, 65th minute is when he makes a change.
So it's 18 minutes since the first goal is when Roberto Martinez finally makes the change.
Yeah.
Ooh, maybe he's just a fan of a good, long, very well-prepared warm-up?
Yeah, maybe. But I think we were confused by this because, as we said, like you could see this pattern starting to emerge at the end of the first half, where Japan started to recognize there is a vulnerability in the middle. There is lots of space if we can get in there with the pressure and hit on the counterattack. And it seems like, I think you spotted that it felt like what Roberto Martinez did at halftime was say to Kevin De Bruyne, you need to run around more and get more involved in the attack.
I think he was like, get farther forward. Like, don't worry about the gaps behind, get farther forward. And that was the wrong advice, I feel like. And again, maybe based in arrogance, maybe based in thinking, I think we've got this team. Yeah?
I think it was because it wasn't even, like, just to clarify, there were so many moments at the beginning of the second half where it was Kevin De Bruyne on the right side and Axel Witsel behind him by 15 yards. So it was almost like if you had a midfield diamond, but it was a midfield diamond where three players were on one side and one was on the left side. Like it's just so much space between.
And then you've also got, in terms of when the ball is turned over, you never see, say, Eden Hazard or Dries Mertens tracking back to fill in any of those gaps. Nope. They're not a functional part of Belgium's defensive midfield, right? So there is no Belgian defensive midfield once Axel Witsel has vacated the space.
Absolutely. And I think then to connect it to the second goal, I also think you're kind of right here that it felt like Kevin De Bruyne was told, look, Witsel can handle the defensive responsibility. We want you involved in the attack. And I say that because from experience, because maybe I'm a little bit more attacking or selfish than you, if a coach tells you...
The answer's both.
Yeah, probably. If the coach says, I want you focused on the attack, I want you just like primarily looking to help create attacks, to help create chances, that doesn't mean, but also get back and defend. And I think for this second goal, it's very obvious that Kevin De Bruyne's defensive switch is not turned on. Because I can take us through it. It's basically it's a Belgium turnover. It's another Japan counter. Inui out on the left chips in a ball for Kagawa. I think it's headed clear sort of by Kompany, collected by Kagawa, and then basically from there he lays it off.
Can we talk about Kagawa's touch though? Because there's a moment where the ball is in front of Kagawa. I think Witsel maybe is thinking about going to bite on it, maybe to tackle him, and he does that great skill where you essentially mid-air scoop the ball towards yourself. That's what Kagawa does, right? It's a beautiful touch and self-serve scoop, and then he lays it off to Inui.
That's the thing, right? So it's beautiful work from Kagawa, right? And he does some great footwork. It would be
not for the first time this game.
Not for the first time this game, but it would be like almost more acceptable if he had done that and then scored, because at least it's like, it's an individual moment of brilliance. But two things here: one, he lays it off to the player who sent it to him in the first place, Inui.
Yeah.
So no one has tracked Inui. Then you can see as that ball is laid off, when he goes to hit it, Kevin De Bruyne is maybe 4 yards away and at most walks to try to make a play on this ball.
He lets Axel Witsel make the desperate attacking check. Really, Witsel is doing the work of two men because he tries to tackle Kagawa and then tries to tackle Inui. De Bruyne is just strolling the whole time. I think, and this is maybe a preview of what happens on Belgium's winning goal, De Bruyne is waiting, thinking, well, the plan here is Witsel tackles, then he gives it to me. Then I, Kevin, king of the counter-attack, De Bruyne, lead the counter-attack. Which is fine when it happens, not fine when it doesn't happen, because then you're just a luxury that's being carried by the rest of the midfield.
But we've also talked about this.
I love Kevin De Bruyne, by the way.
As do I. But we've talked about this on a couple of occasions, that like even if Kevin De Bruyne isn't going to be there to block that shot or to put in a slide tackle, if you give Inui the time to figure out, like to be in the right rhythm and the right run-up, he's going to hit it exactly how he wants. And here it's that kind of punch. It puts absolutely no spin on the ball. It's a lovely hit. But if Kevin De Bruyne is sliding in or just making him think about it, maybe he thinks, I'll take another touch and try to get around Kevin De Bruyne, and it slows down again.
So it's a great goal from Inui, but he definitely has far too much time to punch this himself.
Yeah.
You briefly demonstrated here in the studio.
Yeah.
How does he hit this ball and put almost no rotation on it? There's like an eighth of a rotation of the ball. You can see the logo of the ball stay more or less still as it travels past Thibaut Courtois.
I mean, it's tough to really explain, especially since it's just an amazing strike, and it's also difficult to explain shooting via podcast. But basically, the best way I can put it is, as I said, it's like a punch where you hit it. He hits it with his right laces, toe stays pointed. But he really tries to limit the follow through because that's where you can stop a lot of the spin. You put
that's
a lot
where
of
the
knuckle on
spin
it,
comes from.
And you can see how much like torque he's putting or how much power he's putting into it because his left foot, the plant foot, basically follows through at the same time. Like he ends up trying to, in order to pull that foot back, you basically have to put a lot of the force into your plant foot.
Yeah.
So the plant foot moves almost as much as the shooting foot.
Oh, go on, Inui.
Yeah.
I mean, even though Japan are out, Inui has definitely been, for me, one of the discoveries of the tournament. I was aware of him from the preview stuff where he scored a bunch of goals for Japan coming in, but this is a really, really special player.
Absolutely.
And he's unfortunate to be on the losing team.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Because at this point, Japan 2-0, Japan looked full of energy, Belgium looked confused. Finally, in the 65th minute, under duress / advice from one of his assistants, Roberto Martinez makes a change. And this is the change that changes the game.
It is, and it's definitely necessary because we kept watching, and there was another opportunity where Japan did the exact same thing. Came through the middle. This time they played it wide. Carrasco was too far inside, and I think you really saw the vulnerabilities of Belgium's system once again, and that is when that change happens. And so it's Carrasco coming off, and it's Fellaini coming on, and it's also Chadli coming on.
In place of
Dries Mertens. Well, Chadli comes on for Carrasco, Fellaini for Dries Mertens.
There we go. And I think the big change here is that Belgium essentially, finally, have a three-man midfield. Because I know there's going to be a lot of talk about how Fellaini's the big guy and he went in the box and he won a header that scored the equaliser. But that's actually, weirdly, not his key involvement. Fellaini's key involvement is that he joined Axel Witsel and Kevin De Bruyne in central midfield so that finally, instead of sort of chasing shadows and running all over the place, Axel Witsel could sit centrally, really sit centrally at sort of the backwards point of a triangle, and then he could have De Bruyne to his left and Fellaini to his right. And De Bruyne and Fellaini could wander around a bit, they could join the attack, but the whole time Axel Witsel now stays in the number 6 defensive midfield spot, finally adds some structure to Belgium's midfield, and everything starts to work out from there. It is no coincidence.
No, I mean, and you can point to the 68th minute, 67:44 is when I would say the inciting incident occurs that leads to the goal, which is several minutes later, to be fair. But in this situation, it is Kagawa, and I believe it is Hasebe. There it is. Hasebe in the middle, and in the past, it would have been Witsel pulled out of position. They could have combined and gone right through the middle. But he holds space, and essentially, I believe it's Hasebe kind of panics because suddenly Axel Witsel goes to close him down. He doesn't want to get caught in possession. He tries to play a really direct ball and hits Kagawa in the face, and it spills wide. Japan panic. They kick it out for a throw-in. That throw-in leads to a corner. That corner leads to another corner. That corner leads to a goal.
Yep,
there we go.
That is exactly what happens, yeah. Can we talk about this goal?
Sure.
This is the Vertonghen goal. So I'm putting most of this on the Japanese goalkeeper.
Agreed.
Unfortunately, I think we've had some criticisms of Kawashima, throughout this tournament. This was a bad moment for him.
Absolutely.
First of all, so Chadli pops a header back in towards the box, right? I don't think Kawashima should come for this unless he's going to catch it or punch it really far away. All he does is end up knocking it back down into danger.
I'm not even sure he gets a hand to it. He might.
He does. He beats Lukaku to it, but not very convincingly.
But to do so, he
gets a wet palm to it.
He has to run around 3 of his own teammates to try to get it away from Lukaku. But there's no way he's ever meeting that. And he did have a few where he met them with power fist and punched it clear. This one he doesn't. And in trying to do so, he then leaves himself 12 yards from goal with the ball about 18 yards from goal.
I think he's lost at this point. He's too far away from his goal. Then the ball is popped over to the other side where Vertonghen, the centre-back, meets it. I would bet all the money I have that Vertonghen is trying to head the ball across goal, looking for Lukaku or Fellaini at the far post. he just puts it a little bit too far towards goal, and it just floats in.
Yeah.
And Kawashima just scrambles, runs backwards, turns around, ends up in the back of his own net as Vertonghen's attempted pass header lands in the far corner. That's what happens.
And I would say this, if you go back and watch it, Kawashima looks like he's gotten himself into the right spot. That by the time Vertonghen is heading this ball back across, Kawashima has come over. He is protecting his near post in case Vertonghen somehow chooses to put that header at the near post. Kawashima is there. But I think the point that we landed on is that the difference, though, is Kawashima comes for that punch. He doesn't get it. Then he runs back to the middle. Then he runs to the near post. And I think along the way, if you're just holding your ground, if you're standing in the middle and waiting, I'm standing in the middle of the goal. Okay, now I'm sliding to the right. But if you're running all over the place, it's very easy to lose track of exactly where you are and specifically exactly where the goal is. Because
part of being a goalkeeper is just, your reference point is you know exactly where the goal is behind you. I think Kawashima's maybe a little bit dizzy, a little bit lost, doesn't quite have all his reference points. I mean, I've seen... when Manchester City played Wolves quite a long time ago, back in the Robinho days, Shay Given was in goal, right? I saw him Shay Given in the warm-up got into an argument with the Wolves grounds crew because he went around his 6-yard box and kept kicking little marks into the 6-yard area. And when I watched him during the game, these were reference points that he would had, so that he would know exactly which mark he'd made tells him where he is in relation to the goal behind him. So a lot of goalkeeping is knowing where your goal is and having reference points for it. If you sprint around in a big circle, you lose those reference points.
I mean, and I think it's very much indicated by the fact that when Kawashima goes to save this, he dives into his own goal. Again, but I really do think this time he thinks, I'm going to jump back, push this over the bar, and it'll be okay. It's not great, but at least I'm making a play. And by the time he's touching the ball, they're both very much already in the goal. Yep. So there's no way that was what he intended, and I think it comes about because he's overeager in that challenge.
Okay, but it's not all Kawashima's fault. What I mean is the Japanese loss is not all Kawashima's fault. I would maybe say that his overeagerness to go and get that ball maybe represents a mistake that Japan made in the latter stages of this game.
What would that be?
Because to their credit, they kept trying to attack, even when they had the lead. And I want that to work out for teams. I remember I kept saying this watching it. I want it to work out when a team keeps attacking, keeps sending fullbacks forward, right? The right back, I've forgotten his name, Sakai, and the left back, Nagatomo, kept bombing forward. Japan kept trying to play through the middle. They were sending numbers forward. It's my pet hate, but they were sending centre-backs forward for corner kicks. They never did everybody get behind the ball and we'll see this out for the last 20 minutes move. And unfortunately, they paid for it.
Yeah, I would say that that's always a logical extension of if you keep stretching yourself when you're trying to see out a win, you end up leaving yourself vulnerable. I would argue this is kind of a failure from Japan because I think they don't learn from their mistakes after this goal, and they certainly don't learn from their mistakes after the second goal.
Ooh, okay, so how do they not learn from their mistakes?
Because the second goal, as I think this is where Daryl, we got a lot of tweets about how happy is Daryl right now, how pleased is Daryl, because it comes about from a Japanese corner kick that is, I guess, partially cleared. Nasser Chadli goes down the sideline. Who is it who's trying to take him out?
Oh, it's Inui. Yeah. The left winger tries twice. He tries to grab his arm, he tries to grab his jersey. In the end, Chadli just gets away.
Yeah, and then it's a couple sequences after that, but it's Japan scrambling to try to make a play on it, and it ends in a corner for Belgium once again. But again, it's Japan sort of committing too many numbers forward and then trying to flood everybody back, and then you don't know where everybody's supposed to be. You don't know where you're supposed to be. Similar to Kawashima not knowing his marks as a goalkeeper, and it leads to a corner, and then you're trying to defend in a scrambly fashion.
And this is where Fellaini scores the header. Right? Yep. I think not directly from this corner, but maybe Belgium recycle it. Hazard goes one way, then the other. I think Osako, the striker, is defending Hazard, which is not a good matchup.
Not so much.
Hazard crosses to the far post. Fellaini heads it past Kawashima. People will say, I think this is the important difference in the narrative here.
Put on the long hair. That's what Alexi Lalas said.
I think, and he's right? Because Fellaini scores the header because he's great in the air at the far post. But I think the important thing to take away from this game is not just that Fellaini stood up front and scored a header and equalised for Belgium. It's also that Fellaini made Belgium's midfield work.
Yep.
He made it so that Witsel could do a defensive midfield job, and then Fellaini and De Bruyne had the freedom to go and attack.
Yeah.
But not to say that Fellaini isn't great in the air at attacking headers, because that's what he does here.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, he really keeps his feet moving. He doesn't get settled. He doesn't just stand there. People wonder why you put him on late. I guess this is the reason why, because he really causes problems, and the big thing is puts himself in a position where he can go and meet the ball and attack it.
That's it. He's not just a big dude who stands there, right? He's constantly on his toes, moving around, making sure he has at least a short run up to attack it, which is, how you win headers.
Yep, and how you score the equalizing goal, as he does. So it's 2-2, but this is what I mean when I say I think Japan didn't learn from their mistakes, is we're in, the 94th minute, 93rd minute, something like that, and Japan get a corner off of a set piece again, and they once again send their center backs forward. In fact, the first time I think they only sent one, this time they send both, and I feel like they genuinely did not learn their lesson because the goal comes from a counterattack.
So this is Japan thinking, we can win the game.
I think so.
This is our chance to win the game. Let's send, Yoshida, and I always forget the other centre-back's name, Shoji. Yoshida and Shoji both go forward.
Right.
The only time you do that is if you really think we're going to win this in normal time. In some ways, I want to praise Japan for that, for the audacity to try that. But long-time listeners will know my, not pet hate, but my pet theory is that when you send both centre-backs forward, you are exposing yourself at the back. You are at high alert risk for counter-attack.
Yep. So just as they were for the first, here they are again. Thibaut Courtois comes out, collects the corner, plays it short to Kevin De Bruyne, and 10 seconds later, less than that, Japan have gone down. Belgium have won the game.
You timed it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, less than 10 seconds. Again, it starts with Kevin De Bruyne. We mentioned this earlier that he was maybe waiting for it when Axel Witsel was attempting to tackle Inui on the second goal. This is Kevin De Bruyne getting his chance to shine. He did not disappoint, right? Because the killer ball that he plays after he strides through the midfield to Meunier, this is the special part of this counter-attack, I believe.
Why is that?
Because it's sort of it goes ahead. First of all, it's got a little bit of disguise on it, right? Like he does it almost in stride, and he also hits it with, I believe, the outside of his foot, so it bends a little bit, and it's almost like it's like an Uber that drives ahead and pulls up, ready for Meunier to run on the end of it.
So it's a through ball.
It's a through ball, but with a bit of extra description on it. It's also, I think, Lukaku. I think De Bruyne waits for Lukaku to make an interior run to drag defenders away from where Meunier would have been. I mean, look how long it took me to describe all that. That's what Kevin De Bruyne reads before he passes.
Yeah, and I think it's to his credit again, because that run from Romelu Lukaku, I think when you have a player like Lukaku, who is so proven as a goal scorer, there would be that inclination to, I'll play it in for him, he'll do something. And instead, I think Kevin De Bruyne recognizes that the Japanese defenders, such as they are going to move with Lukaku.
Such as they are.
As in you don't have your center box back. Yeah. So then you can play that ball into space, and now once again, they're scrambling. So the left back for Japan, Nagatomo, he tries to follow Lukaku, then he tries to go wide for Meunier, and again, that leaves space in the middle. So when that ball goes in I think it's for Lukaku.
Oh, definitely.
He very wisely, I'm guessing he gets a scream from Chadli and lets it run through the legs, gives it the dummy. Chadli's there to finish, and Belgium have their win.
You know who's sliding in on Chadli?
Is it Shoji?
It's Shoji.
Yeah.
Shoji was in the 6-yard box on the attacking corner. Again, I don't think he should have been there, but he sprints the length of the field. He gives everything he's got. He's a millisecond too late to block Chadli's shot.
But maybe don't go forward, and then you're not even late.
Oh, so
and I don't mean to keep harping on that, because I'm sure Japanese fans are devastated by this result. But there is something to be said for, if you want to try to kill the game off, you've got to then also recognize that there is a possibility that comes back to bite you, and you've got to put yourself in a position to deal with that counterattacking possibility. So if that means you stand in the way of Courtois, somebody steps in front and gets a yellow card and blocks that counter, you've got to have that preparation. And I think that's what the best teams in this tournament have, and those who don't aren't there anymore.
But I think the decision they made is part of what is making this World Cup so much fun, right? It's a very non-cynical, almost naive, idealistic decision to send everybody forward when it's 2-2 in the final 30 seconds.
I'm genuinely actually confused by this.
Why?
Because you seem like I don't see how you can be of two minds on this. You are so against sending center backs forward.
I don't think it's a good idea.
But you're kind of praising it at the same time.
As a neutral, hoping for entertainment. Yeah, if England do it against Colombia and we lose, there'll be a 20-minute segment where I'm fuming about it.
So you're just enjoying Japan's pain.
Kind of. If I was a Japan fan, I would not be happy about this at all.
I imagine they are not, but I imagine the Belgian fans are. Although I really do think they're going in to the next round to play to play Brazil.
Yeah.
Even with a Casemiro-less, that's a hard one to say, midfield, he'll be out with suspension. I still think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Brazil to exploit some of the gaps that Belgium will likely have.
We would hope that they start the game the way they finished this one, with a more solid central midfield. I got one final question for you. Roberto Martinez, or his assistant, it might be Graham Jones, the English assistant, they made a change and it changed the game, right? They won the game by going to those 3 central midfielders. Does that make Martinez and his staff brilliant? Or did they just make a horrible mistake from the very beginning and only fixed it just in time?
I mean, I would say neither. I would say somewhere in between for both. I don't think it was a horrible mistake. I think it's understandable if you expect to have your foot on the gas, to have all the attack.
Yeah.
Why would you play two holding midfielders when you expect to be shooting and shooting and shooting and keeping possession, which they did. But I also think it was an obvious problem that Japan kept being able to find space. I mean, from the first minute, I think I was sort of like, ooh, Japan are getting opportunities to the middle and out wide, and Belgium seemed like they kind of haven't figured out what to do with that. And so I think he deserves credit for making the changes that get the result, but it still, I think, leaves a lot of question marks heading into the next round. And, Daryl Grove, speaking of question marks, if you have question marks about your vision, then our sponsor for today has got you covered.
Today's show is sponsored by Simple Contacts, the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes.
Mm-hmm. So Daryl is bespectacled. He wears his contact lenses.
I love that word.
And then when you take your glasses off, you're DB spectacled.
Yeah. So when I play soccer especially is when I wear contact lenses. Yeah. No rec specs for me. Contact lenses all the way.
I wish you were rec specs. My wife wears contacts. I do not. She used Simple Contacts. She had rave things to say about them, starting with
the fact... rave?
Yes. Starting with the fact that she did not do the vision test that they offer because she had a prescription. Mm-hmm. Her concern, though, was
a current prescription.
Her concern, though, was like when she's used these services in the past, she wasn't sure, and that made it really awkward because when she would go to say, like, I need them refilled, if she used an online contact service, whatever, they would call the doctor. If it didn't go through, you're kind of out of luck. With Simple Contacts, if you're not sure, you call, the doctor says it's a no-go, then you do their online test, you get your prescription, you're good to go.
Oh,
so you can sort of test it, and if it doesn't work, then you can use their service.
So there's peace of mind, even if you're not sure about your current prescription. You know you've got a fallback, which is the online vision test, which I have done twice and I like.
And I would say, I'm going to quote her here. She said she will never go back to another online company
never go back.
No, because she said she never got this level of personal service. It took like a widely varying number of hours and days to figure out if it was approved, if it was being shipped. She had approval within a few hours with Simple Contacts, and then she was notified when it was shipping. It was shipping like the next day or the day after. She got her stuff. She was good to go. There was no waiting. There was no delay. She had that delay before where it was like, no, it's fine. My eyes are fine, as they're like bright red and on fire. So it was very nice that she didn't have to deal with that.
There is something very reassuring about getting those notifications of where you are in the process, right?
100%.
I'm quite a naive-ish person who just trusts that processes work. But I still, like, when I order something, I'm like, that's probably on the way, right? Yeah. But I still feel much more reassured when I get the step-by-step notification. This has been approved. This has been packed. This has been shipped. It's going to be at your house on this day.
Yeah, because then you don't have that, like, I'm assuming it's all okay and it will arrive. And then when it doesn't, because even when you don't have that notification, then you don't know where you are in the process. So it might be, they haven't arrived on the day they were supposed to, but that's also because the order was never processed. Whereas Simple Contacts, you have those notifications all the way through. So again, it relieves that stress both on your eyes and on your brain.
Best of all, if you use the TSS code, you can get $20 off the cost of your lenses when you order through Simple Contacts. So here's how you do that. You go to simplecontacts.com/TSS and you enter the promo code TSS at checkout and you will get $20 off the price of your lenses.
Reminder, this is not a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam, so you still have to do that, but they've got you covered when it comes to contacts and vision and avoiding spec recs.
Spec recs?
Yeah, what are they called?
You meant rec specs.
Rec specs, that's the one. See, I'm so not familiar with glasses.
Simplecontacts.com/TSS, and once again, enter the code TSS at checkout. Thank you, Simple Contacts, for making it simple.
Mm-hmm. And thank you to whoever did the scheduling at FIFA for making sure that Daryl had to wait until the very last possible day and game for England to play their knockout round game.
Come on. Come on. It's actually.
to be fair, if you had just beaten Belgium, then you would have played today. So it's kind of on you.
That's true. So England have to play Colombia tomorrow instead, which weirdly might be the toughest game in this side of the bracket.
Yeah, Russia-Spain would be maybe the other one, but yeah. Daryl just made a face.
The weirdest one remaining. I was making the face at Russia as if Russia was a harder game than Colombia.
Understood. No, I think you're right.
But you said last game, right? So that's the 2 p.m. game on Fox. The 10 a.m. game on Fox is Sweden-Switzerland.
You got it.
So Sweden-Switzerland, and the winners of these two games will play each other in the quarterfinal.
Yep.
Fingers crossed for one particular team. Let's get into Sweden-Switzerland first. Then.
Sure.
The appetizer.
For Sweden, Seb Larsson is both injured and suspended, which is quite a feat. So that means this.
Don't put money on him playing then.
No, I would say definitely do not. If you have him in your fantasy team, first of all, what are you doing? Second of all, get him out of there.
Seb Larsson, central midfielder. Does this mean that the man from Seattle Sounders gets to replace him?
It does. Gustav Svensson is the most likely candidate to replace Seb Larsson, so look for him to be in the middle of that 4-4-2, which we have come to know and be okay with.
Why are you so sure that Sweden will play a 4-4-2?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's just a shot in the dark. Who knows?
50 years of history.
Yeah, exactly. And then really that's about it. I mean, it's the same Sweden lineup more or less that we come to expect. Probably Granqvist and Lindelof will be your two center backs.
I mean, Granqvist is your secret. He's your Pazdan.
Yes, he is. I love that man.
Yeah,
I love that man
he's
quite a bit.
He's probably a better player than Pazdan as well.
I was trying to remember who my other one was because I've come to very much appreciate Mario Mandzukic, and I knew there was two more, and one of them is definitely Granqvist. So thank you for that. Oh, the other one is Batshuayi. I love Michy Batshuayi for this tournament.
The reason I think I equate Granqvist with Pazdan is that they both look kind of unfashionable.
Yeah,
and Granqvist especially, right?
Yeah,
and yet he's I think a lot sort of cooler and more interesting than he looks when he strolls out of the back with the ball.
Granqvist should be dropping children off somewhere with a minivan. That's what I feel like when you see.
And looking really unhappy about it.
And not really fitting into the minivan because he's a large man. But yeah, that's where I see him. The other thing I do see as being an interesting matchup, Stefan Lichtsteiner and Cher. We've learned how to pronounce that one.
Yep.
They're both suspended, which means Michael Lang and Johan Giroud will likely play for them.
So Cher probably wishes he could turn back time.
There we go. You did it. Good job. Yes, and Michael Lang will deputize it right back. That means he will be going up against the theoretically creative force of Emil Forsberg.
The potentially creative force of Emil Forsberg.
I'm going to say this is the game. We've been predicting it for a while. We've been talking about it. I feel like this is the game where we see that spark of this is why everybody was excited about Emil Forsberg.
Yeah.
Specifically, the person who wrote us him being one of the breakout players of this World Cup.
Yes.
And I think
why haven't we seen Forsberg do his stuff so far? Is it just because Sweden have such a rigid, structured defensive 4-4-2? There's not really room to do much else.
I think that's sort of it, because I would say, everybody knows he's very good, and so they isolate him. But I think the reality is, unless he goes on a great solo run, he's gotten the ball, and it's sort of as Sweden do the same things that have the same kind of mechanisms of play. I don't think one of those is everybody shifts over to support a great run from Forsberg. So I think unless he has an individual effort, it's a lot more of the team play that we've come to expect, and it's a lot more of the looking to counterattack. But I think against Switzerland's deputizing right back, their second string right back, I think maybe he just has a couple more goes at that defender than he would have otherwise running against Stefan Lichtsteiner, now of Arsenal, the Switzerland captain.
Okay, all right, so Cher, the centre-back, is missing. My guess is that Johan Giroud replaces him, formerly of Arsenal. I do know that a lot of Switzerland fans were very into the idea of Giroud not starting, so I'm not sure what's wrong with Giroud, except that maybe just Cher and Manuel Akanji are just the darlings of Swiss fans.
What's wrong with Giroud? Sounds like an indie film. And it will be very interesting to see how he does, because my expectation, based on the games we've seen so far, Sweden will be in their 4-4-2. They will sit back. They will frustrate Switzerland. They will not necessarily concede the flanks, but they won't be so worried if Xherdan Shaqiri is dribbling down the sideline, because they'll just keep their numbers back and deal with those crosses as they come. But how Akanji and Giroud deal with Toivonen and Berg, who aren't the paciest of forwards for Sweden,
but not the slowest either.
They're not slow, and they are physical, and they can win those challenges. So Akanji,
isn't the thing we figured out is that Sweden, they stay so compact that in some ways they're quite high up the field. So when they do turn the ball over, or when they win the turnover, Berg and Toivonen don't need to sprint 50 yards. They just need to barrel forward for 10 yards.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So I really will be fascinated how the likely center back partnership of Akanji and Giroud deal with both the high up the field positioning of those two, as well as the physicality of ball into the box, who knocks the one over so it doesn't get settled for the other.
I've just remembered that the only thing we've seen Akanji do wrong is when he got sort of muscled out the way by Kendall Waston, I think, in the final group stage game against Costa Rica. Outside of that, keep your eyes on Manuel Akanji, young Swiss centre-back, because he's got the telescope legs, he's pretty rapid, he can make up some ground, and he is not afraid to go in hard but clean.
Yes.
Right? Hard but clean is how Manuel Akanji plays his game.
Yes, and I think that maybe is a good way of saying that's kind of what I would expect from this game, is hard tackling and a lot of like sort of defensive soccer. And I think what I'm saying, I'm very happy to be wrong here, but I have a feeling I'm lowering expectations now. I think this will be a fairly dull game.
Because
could be totally wrong.
Sweden will defend, and Switzerland aren't necessarily Brazil in terms of the way they create things. Shaqiri shots from distance, over under, I'm setting at 6.
Yes, and I do think with that in mind that you're going to see the importance of set pieces, which has already been well established in this tournament, come once again to the forefront, because I could see Sweden taking those as key opportunities to get bodies in the box and maybe overcommit numbers. We've seen Grönqvist go on a wander, not a negative wander, but like get into the attack through those set pieces.
Swedish Beckenbauer.
Yeah, but you look at how big those gentlemen are going to be, especially the Swedish Beckenbauer. I would expect Sweden to be focused on utilizing set pieces to their advantage. And so I could see this being a slow kind of grind-out game that maybe finishes 1-0, maybe goes to extra time. And again, we'll be very happy when it finishes 4-3.
I have 2 Swiss questions for you. You mentioned there was one winger was suspended, so Bro Embolo might start?
That's more so that Zuber is sick. So
excuse me, Zuber is sick.
He's usually on the left wing, Shaqiri on the right. If Zuber can't go, and even if he could go, it's been speculated that it might be Bro Embolo instead because he has looked more lively and more threatening.
Yep, so look out for Bro Embolo's shoulder work. He's very good at shouldering people off the ball and going past you. And then he's up against Lustig, right, who I always think of as someone who's not that good, and then he always surprises me with a great performance.
I'm sure he'd love that one, yes.
Yeah. Final question, Granit Xhaka.
Yeah.
I'm always confused by Granit Xhaka. Is he brilliant or is he terrible? How does he perform in this game? Does he spray passes around and spread Sweden out, or does he give the ball away and concede counterattacks?
I think that is maybe one of the other narratives to look for in this game is what he's doing. If he's getting frustrated and trying to force through balls and kind of is not helping maintain possession, that's a bad thing. I would also say if he's overly focused on retaining possession, if it's a lot of left to right and right to left and then left to right again, that's not what you need from him either. I think it will be him trying to spring counterattacks if ever they're on, but also trying to be patient on the ball and find more threatening opportunities, more threatening passes. That's what I would look for to determine whether or not Xhaka is having a good game.
With all due respect to this game, I feel now very knowledgeable about it because we've researched it and we've talked about it. I'm still not excited about it.
No, I mean, I think neither one of these are, like, it's certainly not as thrilling as, say, Germany-Serbia might have been, potentially. Even, like, Germany-Costa Rica could have been fascinating because you've got that very different style of play.
Yeah.
But I think this is part of what we enjoy about the World Cup is there's always those teams that we know significantly less about making their way to the knockout rounds, and then to see how they perform and how they achieve and how they progress is always an interesting thing to keep an eye on.
And I'll put the address for the Manuel Akanji fan club in today's show notes.
It's Daryl at TotalSoccerShow.com. That's pretty much it.
There's a weekly newsletter, a weekly circular that goes out. All right, but the big game for me of the day, that game was 10 a.m. Big game is 2 p.m. on Fox. Colombia versus England. England in the knockout rounds. I'm nervous. Can we do the fan part first?
Sure.
I am extremely nervous.
Okay.
Just because, as Gareth Southgate said today in today's press conference, in fact, Gareth Southgate said, it's been 10 years since we won a knockout game in a tournament.
And he's so nervous that he got his math wrong?
He's so nervous he got it wrong. It's actually been 12 years. I believe the last time we won a knockout round game was 2006 against Ecuador. Yeah.
At least
we're playing a South American team that wears yellow again?
Yeah. It's
so does that.
It's enough time to forget all the heartache, and instead everybody will feel invigorated.
Yeah.
Why else are you nervous?
I mean, just because it's all the usual stuff, right? Like the one thing is, as it's been noted, by finishing second in the group, England are on the easier side of the bracket, right? And it's been noted that there's, Colombia, England, Sweden, Switzerland, Croatia, or Russia are gonna be in the World Cup final, which is crazy to think about.
It sure is.
This is England's biggest chance to go as deep as they possibly can in a tournament. Their best chance in a long, long time. And the thing that makes me nervous is, what if we fall at the first hurdle? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because then we'll be looking back thinking, oh, we could have taken Russia.
I think a major factor in whether or not England fall at the first hurdle is the eligibility and fitness of James Rodriguez.
Interesting. Let's get into that then.
A massive, massive issue for Colombia. So it wasn't the injury that he had coming into the tournament. It was a secondary issue to his calf that had to have him removed from the Senegal game, the final group stage game. It really seems like it's very much up in the air as to whether or not he will start, let alone play in this game.
Here's what I know. He missed practice.
I think I switched that around. Maybe it should have been play, let alone start.
There we go. He missed practice on Friday and Saturday.
Yep.
Right? It's only, Monday today? So that suggests maybe he's been back in practice the last 2 days. Peckerman, the Colombia coach, says he had a scan. And it's good news because it's not a serious injury. Other reporting I've seen, I actually smuggled his chart out of the hospital. The swelling on his calf muscle, but no tear. So that is good, meaning that it's not completely over. Because if there was a tear, he would not be playing in this World Cup again. But there's also reporting that it's going to be more or less a game day decision. So my guess is that James either plays not being 100% or doesn't play at all.
Yep.
There is no way you get a 100% fit James in this game.
I think this is a very obvious thing to say, but it's what I'm going to go with. I think we won't know until we know. We won't know until kickoff. And I mean that because I think there's a chance that James Rodriguez has torn his calf muscle, and they just don't want to say that because they don't want England to game plan for a Colombia team without James Rodriguez. Yep. There's also a chance that he's fully fit to play, and this is gamesmanship.
Oh, I think I had not considered that angle.
I think that is part of what you do when you're preparing for a knockout round game is you don't want to tip your hand, you don't want to give anything away. So I really don't put much faith in anybody outside of somebody who literally did smuggle out his chart and said, oh, yep, it's swelling of the calf, because that to me feels very vague in he has back injuries sort of way of like, oh no, there's no tearing, but he has a swollen calf, but he didn't train, but he might be okay. Yeah. It all just feels so vague that it doesn't feel specific enough for it to be a specific injury, and thus I feel like they're trying to keep it under wraps.
Okay, let's question what happens if he does play.
Sure.
I think what happens if he does play is Colombia go with a relatively attacking lineup in the 4-2-3-1. There's two defensive midfielders, probably Aguilar and Sanchez.
Aguilar, I think, is still injured as well.
I read reporting that he was back.
See, there we go. See, this is Colombia being tricky.
Two defensive midfielders, soon to be named.
Yeah.
Then ahead of them, you've got Falcao as the striker.
I've heard
you
of him.
will have, I believe, Quintero underneath him. He's been brilliant since deputising for James. Cuadrado on the right. James Rodriguez on the left. That is, I think, how Colombia would prefer to line up. From what I've read, if James is not fit to go, Peckerman has tipped his hand a little bit that it's probably Muriel, who's a bit quicker, I think, a bit more direct. He'll play on the left, and it will be Quintero running the show.
Yep. I mean, and I think the reason why we're focused on James Rodriguez is not just because he's a world-class player and he can score goals and he is fun to watch. It's because we've watched Colombia many times, both in the 2014 World Cup, the 2016 Copa America Centenario, even a little bit in 2015. And he is key in how Colombia go about triggering that press. We call it the mousetrap press, right?
Yeah, they pull back a little bit when you've got the ball, especially so when England have the ball. And this is important because England like to play out of the back. They're not going long. They will pull back a little bit, like to midfield, and then they'll spring on you. And it's often James that is the one that triggers it. It'll probably be Falcao doing it if James is not there. But then they come after you all of a sudden, and you are under pressure, and you're trying to pass out of the back, and they're going to rob you of the ball. This is the key matchup here. Even when Colombia do have the ball, James is important because he's their number 10. They always look for him, and he's constantly looking for the ball, right? So a lot of it goes through him if he plays.
Yes. I mean, again, it's a big if, because if he doesn't, then you've got Muriel in there, but are they as good when they're triggering that press? Do they all kind of know exactly what their roles are supposed to be?
I've got more confidence in Colombia's James less press than you do. Because I think it's more of a team-wide thing than just a James thing.
Or you're afraid of it. I mean, and I mean that, and I don't mean that like critically. I mean that you have far more of an emotional stake in this game.
Yes.
So I understand why you would just be like, they're going to be amazing.
And look at this from my perspective. I've spent a long, long time watching England teams that are not brave enough to bring the ball out of defence and pass their way through and refuse to kick it long, but we will find a way. We'll find an angle and we'll play it out. This is the first time I can remember where we're going to have John Stones coming out of the back and he is going to be playing to his centre-backs, to his midfielders. He's refusing to kick it long. This is new for England. I love it. It's exciting. It's way prettier to watch than any other England football I've ever seen. But it also comes with a high risk.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that comes with a high risk. I think when it comes to conceding set pieces in dangerous positions, that is also very risky.
Because James, Quintero, all those guys.
Oh, not just because of that, but you've got, as has been proven, Davinson Sanchez and Jerry Mina more than capable of getting on the end of a cross.
Am I right in saying I am? Jerry Mina has scored 2 goals from corner kicks by being very tall.
Yep.
And then some other skills
also
as well.
That too, yeah. So I think what England do to not concede those types of set pieces and how they go about tracking those players who are obviously threats when it comes to those balls into the box. But also, I would say, you have to kind of be focused on not being too aggressive or not giving up silly chances. I look at Kyle Walker against Tunisia. You raise that elbow, it leads to a penalty. If there's a person who is going to be able to game that system and make those incidents look worse and look like they're penalties when maybe they're not even fouls, that's Radamel Falcao.
Falcao's great at winning himself some free kicks.
Yep.
Yeah, he's also great at just finding space across the back line. So there have to be a lot of communication between probably Kyle Walker, John Stones, and either Maguire or Cahill. They have to make sure to keep track of that man. Watch the number 9.
So let's talk about England then.
Yes,
I think we've talked a lot about Colombia. So you've listed it there. So Stones had a calf injury, but it seems like he'll be good to go, correct?
Yes, from what I'm reading. Other injury news is that Dele Alli, who I can't remember what his injury was.
Thigh, I believe.
Thigh. So he came out in the game against Tunisia, right? I think he'll be back. I think he'll start. I think it'll be Jordan Henderson at the base of midfield. Sorry, Tottenham fans, but he's the first pick, right? And then probably Lingard and Dele Alli ahead of Jordan Henderson in the central midfield. The whole key for England is, will they be able to work the ball from goalkeeper to centre-backs? Then Jordan Henderson finds the bit of space to receive the ball. Then can he work it to his fellow midfielders, Lingard and Ali running for space, or out wide to the wing-backs? That's the game for England.
Yeah, because, I mean, you're going to have... And I would say those wingbacks, though, they also don't want to get caught too far forward. They've got to make sure they're doing their responsibilities, specifically, say, Ashley Young against Juan Cuadrado. That's a matchup I'm also going to be keeping an eye on. But, yeah, I think it's going to come down. Oh, man, I just don't know. I don't know who's going to be running that midfield for England.
It's Jordan Henderson's going to be trying to.
I'm going back to the Dele Alli versus Ruben Loftus-Cheek. That's the one that I don't know. Oh, sorry, I said Dele Alli, right?
Yep.
Just want to make sure. Cool.
If Dele Alli's fit, he plays. That's what I think. If he's not quite fit, I think I'm perfectly happy with Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Ahead of them, let's talk about the strike force.
Sure.
Harry Kane is top scorer at the World Cup so far. One of the goals was an accident, but it still counts. He has 5 goals, one more than Lukaku and Ronaldo. Underneath him, I'm almost certain that Raheem Sterling will start this game and not Marcus Rashford.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because Rashford did not do anything to convince us otherwise in that game against Belgium. Fair?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It has only just occurred to me now that you've got Harry Kane of...
Tottenham Hotspur.
And you've got Davinson Sanchez of...
Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah, so they are familiar with each other. So I'm always fascinated by those battles of who knows the other one better and who knows the vulnerabilities of the other one or the tendencies of the other one better.
Ooh, yeah, that's an interesting matchup. I don't know who comes out ahead. It does feel a little bit like Harry Kane's World Cup at the moment. Just if you can accidentally score a hat-trick,
Why are you not knocking on all the wood right now? There we go. That's better.
Anything else from this game you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at England's first team, I would say they have yet to play a strong opponent because obviously it was the second team playing against Belgium. Before that, Panama, Tunisia, no disrespect, but you're not Colombia. And so how that first team deals with Colombia and deals, I think, with a little bit of that pressure of they know that this is probably the strongest opponent they would face until they made the semifinal, maybe the final, if they did that. There's a lot of pressure there. And so how the players respond to that level of pressure, I'll be interested in. If it stays 0-0, if it stays 0-0 through extra time, then we get into penalties. And how do English players deal with the burden, what would that be, like the storm cloud hanging over their heads of penalties in a knockout round of a World Cup?
The albatross around their neck.
There it is.
Thank you. It is. Yeah, so we talked about Mexico earlier and the Quinto Partido. I mean, for England, it's the penalty kicks, right? There are so many we can't even list them. Just take our word for it that England have been knocked out of more tournaments than we can list. Knocked out of tournaments on penalty kicks. This is the curse that hangs over England. If England could win a penalty shootout, that would be a massive psychological weight lifted off of every single England player and every single England fan.
I'm going to put you on the spot here because I'm very curious to hear who you personally, if you went to penalties, would want taking those first 5 kicks.
Harry Kane.
I figured that. That's it, all 5? Okay. But if he can only take the one, which he can.
Matt Letizia, is he available?
I was thinking like Owen Hargreaves. He went pretty well. No, yeah, so in this team, who would you like to see aside from Harry Kane?
Honestly, I can't remember who takes them for their club. Okay,
I'm just saying, who do you have the confidence in to have a bit like belief in themselves, to not be worrying about like England teams of years gone by, but just to be like, I'm going to score this goal.
All right, Kane, Henderson.
Yep.
Lingard.
I would say Lingard. That was,
Dele Alli seems like he deals well with pressure in that he's kind of confident and doesn't care.
Or he'll punch the soccer ball and get a red card?
Possibly. Ashley Young, I want to say, just experienced, and his deltoids would be scary for a goalkeeper.
I would agree with maybe that's it's no coincidence, I guess, that those are the Man United players. But the two that I had in my mind, aside from Harry Kane, were Ashley Young and also Jesse Lingard.
There's probably a centre-back who's a crack penalty taker in practice that we just don't know about.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right? Kyle Walker might be cool as a cucumber taking penalty kicks in practice.
Might be.
We just don't know.
Jordan Pickford?
Actually, so moving away from penalties a second, I don't know if Jordan Pickford's any good at saving penalties. I also don't know if Jordan Pickford is any good in a goal mouth scramble.
Yeah, there's that.
So if Radamel Falcao is cheating on the back of defenders and making runs in and all that, that's the one area where I really would be very relieved in the first 5 minutes if Pickford comes and claims the ball out of the air.
All right.
That's the thing I'll be looking for.
So I think we've established there are lots and lots of things we'll be looking for from both of these games. Yeah. So we will be back tomorrow to review both of those games.
Yes, we will. All right, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we will be back again tomorrow to review the final round of 16 games.